Okay, it looks like we are live now. I'm so excited. I have Debbie here. Debbie, amazing woman. But first, welcome everyone to another heart opening episode of Her Empire, Her Wealth. Today's conversation is one I believe so many women need to hear, especially those who have been silently strong for too long. I'm honored to be joined by Christian therapist and relationship coach Debbie Caudle, whose powerful story, the crossroad moment from our upcoming book, Girl Heal, right? That's coming up. Will be face to face here with the reality of what happens when we've poured out everything but our poured out everything for everyone but ourselves. So Debbie, thank you for being here. I can already feel this is going to be one of those conversation that stays with people.
Well, Jennifer, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to have collaborated on this book. It's been such a great project.
Yes, I can't wait for the book. The book will
Yeah.
Girl Heal will be publishing August 25th. And Debbie wrote a very powerful chapter inside this book that I got to reading. And so I'm really excited to discuss a little bit about that in this episode. And I have a few questions right after reading your chapter. Obviously, we're not going to give all the details because the book will be
Right.
coming out soon, but
Yeah.
I do want to ask, there's some things that I read on there that really had me thinking. And maybe I would really like if we can go back to that moment in 2013. You wrote about sitting in a car, pretending to be okay while internally everything was falling apart. Can you walk us through what really was happening in your world at that time?
Yeah.
Maybe how long had you been silently suffering before it all hit you physically?
Yeah. At the tail end of 2012, I was so burnt out. My husband and I at the time, we're divorced now, but my husband at the time and I, we had a counseling practice that where we worked together in the practice, and we used horses with clients, and he was my equine professional, and we had this horse ranch and 7 head of horses and a big giant indoor arena. And I remember 5 years before, when we were building all of that, I said to him, because he was a contractor, I said, I don't want all of the financial pressure of this business on me. Like, I just don't want the weight of that. But you can't really do that kind of therapy without having an equine specialist present. So he did end up having to step full time into the business. And what that meant for me was just, it was a lot of, not only was I responsible for all the client outcomes, I was responsible for all the business side of it too. He didn't have any interest in doing any of that. He didn't have any computer knowledge at all. And when I say at all, I mean at all. We had employees, so I was handling payroll, I was handling billing, and it was just so stressful. And we lived above the offices, so we never really left work. And so I decided I was going to retire at the end of 2012. I put the word out, to everybody. I'm going to be done with mental health. I'm retiring. But then venturing into 2013, I got really scared about money. Like, how are we going to pay for everything? So I immediately started trying to find solutions and figure it all out, because that had historically been my role. I didn't really trust, for a lot of reasons, that anybody else was going to step up and do that. And so, about a month into 2013, my back started hurting. And there wasn't any real concrete reason for that. It wasn't like I'd had some injury, right before that. It just started hurting. And it got so bad that I couldn't even sit through 2 sessions with a client without having to go get, like, in a hot tub of water just to relax. And so I started, like, cutting back on client load, and we dropped Medicaid, and then I dropped insurance. And I look back on that now and I think that was me subtly, passive aggressively sabotaging the business, because I didn't know how to say, this isn't okay, and I'm not happy, and I didn't even want to really do this equine part of the business. I was just making him happy. I had a successful office practice already. So I had done all these things and made all these sacrifices for him. And the cost of doing something like this with horses is double because you got two staff and horses. It just felt so burdensome and overwhelming. So my back was bad, the incomes getting
Yeah,
slashed in half,
there's a lot happening in that
there's a lot
moment, right? You're
happening.
dealing with
Yeah,
business, clients,
yeah,
everything, right? A-
yeah.
And it can be a
So then
lot.
I
It already building
there's
a
a
business
lot.
in itself, right, is a
Yeah.
lot.
So
And
then I
then the
started having panic
finances.
attacks. Yeah, I
Oh,
started having panic attacks, and so that's what brought me to that moment in the car because I had worked with people who had panic attacks, but I had never experienced them myself, and so it was
so
like,
were you,
"Where
at this
what is
point were
this?"
you were already a therapist, right? So you were
Yeah,
already
yeah.
working in that
Yeah, for a
field.
long time. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah. I'd already been I'd already been a therapist for, 20 years. So this was like the first I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And it felt like this giant elephant sitting on my chest. Hard to
wow,
breathe, would come out of nowhere. And I think I described in the chapter, it was like this dark cloud hovering around me everywhere I went. And I felt like I was stuck and trapped in a life that I didn't know how to change.
wow. That must have been a lot. And I know the title of this in your chapter, we titled it "The Path We Know versus the Path We Need." So at that point, you were really deep into the business and what you were building in your career. And so that's the path at that time that you felt that you knew, right? And then,
Yeah.
so then what happened after?
Yeah. Well, that path that I always tell clients is that's the familiar path. It's not a happy path. It's not a comfortable path, but it's that path of just letting sort of things happen and being very reactive. And so what happened, I guess, is like the turning point for me because I really sort of felt stuck and hopeless was my parents had come to visit from Canada, and they gave me $1,000. I had dropped health insurance as yet another unnecessary cost. I was just trying to streamline everything financially, and they handed me $1,000 cash and said, "Go do something for your back." And there was just this glimmer of hope, like, "Oh, I can do something." So I went to see a chiropractor, and I began to see him weekly, and then I had stopped exercising because I was afraid of injuring it more. And then there were just other little decisions that I made and that I would discuss with my husband about like how to, like we decided let's rent out the ranch and let's buy a house in town and lower our mortgage. And so there were slow subtle shifts, and then there were some big shifts, but a lot of it was just me taking accountability for how I felt, and no more blame, no more like he needs to be different, and
Yeah,
these things around me need to change.
that
Like
is
this is up to
powerful.
me. Yeah.
It's a powerful
Yeah.
realization. And then it sounded like it took, your body your body was taking a toll, right? Your back was hurting, you were having panic
Yeah.
attacks, and it
Yeah.
sounds like the panic attacks taught you something, right? They taught you about maybe there's something that needs to shift.
Yeah. And I didn't it took me a little while, I think, to really put all these things together. When I was going through the panic attacks, I wasn't consciously thinking, what's my body trying to tell me? I was just
Yeah,
going, this sucks. This is awful. And,
yeah,
why is my life so miserable? And it was just one more thing that I was feeling sorry for myself about. And just like in a glum mood. I think what really began to shift me mentally was when I was able to start taking my care of my back. And again, I talk about this in the chapter. I started going to the pool, and all I could
Oh,
do was yeah, all I could do was just, like, jog in the deep end, but so it wasn't doing anything for me cardio-wise, but it gave me a lot of time to think. And when you are alone with your thoughts, I mean, you can't escape them, right? So, it gave me a lot of time to just think about why my life had turned out this way and what I wanted to do to change it. And then that turned into me diving back into journaling, which is something that I had done, since I was 19,
yeah.
off and on. So it was a practice I had already established, but you know how life is, you get away from it. So I started hiking up in the hills behind our ranch. I started doing a lot of writing. The pool was tremendously beneficial for me. And slowly but certain but eventually I began to sort of turn the mental corner.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that really helped you a lot, like putting yourself into that exercise. Like you said, it maybe wasn't too much exercise, but it's therapeutic in itself to go like swimming and start
Yeah.
journaling. And so
Yeah, I
what
mean, the swimming didn't do anything for me
yeah,
body-wise, but it really gave me it just slowed the pace of my life down and gave me that
exactly.
headspace to really start thinking
Yes.
intention. Yeah.
I like that. And then you started journaling because of that as well, right?
Yeah, it
And
started it back up, yeah.
so what resistance did you have to face internally when you started doing that, right? Because you said it forced you to kind of sit with your
Yeah.
thoughts a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't getting any resistance outwardly. Um, I think I learned years later because my marriage didn't end officially until another 5 years. And I think and even then when it ended, it wasn't like my husband was saying, "Well, we did this and I didn't like it." I think I have figured out now since the divorce in 2018, I'm able to go back and look and revisit all that and go, he was agreeing to a lot of things outwardly, but internally, he wasn't happy with those decisions. He didn't wanna move off the ranch. He didn't wanna buy the house in town. And then ultimately, we left Wyoming and moved to Texas, and he didn't wanna do that, but outwardly, he was agreeing to all of it, but he didn't wanna sell his horses. He didn't want that was his dream life. It wasn't
Yeah,
mine, but I was willing to do that for him. Um, but there was no real communication. It was just a lot of him accommodating me, but being very silent about what he wanted on the inside.
yeah,
And,
that can
you know,
cause
the
a lot of
marriage
resistance and
yeah, the
resentment.
marriage yeah, yes, a lot of resentment, I think, that built up, and it never got spoken about ever. It just
Wow,
yeah, yeah,
that's interesting. So it sounds more like he kind of carried that with himself, and you kind of just intuitively had to pick up on that. I do not like that at all
yeah,
when um you're in relationships with people that don't openly communicate how they're feeling, or maybe they don't know how they're feeling at that moment. So it's a lot of self-awareness and accountability at the same time, right? And
yeah, and
it's really
he
hard to work with people like that, you know?
it is hard to work, and part of the reason why it was happening in our marriage is because he doesn't like conflict. So
Yeah, there you
he was
go.
never
That's a big
yeah,
one.
he was never gonna discuss anything that might upset me, make me mad, or
Or
which
even a
was
discussion, right?
right, which was a big assumption on his part, right? That I was gonna get mad, but because he didn't
Exactly.
like conflict, he was doing everything to sidestep the possibility of that. So he was
Exactly.
internalizing everything that he was thinking and feeling and never saying it out loud, and that was
Yeah,
incredibly damaging to us.
I'm sure because, like I said, I feel like as the person that does want to communicate, which was probably you, right? You probably are now left guessing and trying to figure out what's going
Yeah,
on. What is he thinking? Because he won't
yeah.
say it.
Yeah. And that's not to say that, I was the greatest communicator in the marriage either, because I think I learned after a period of time that there was no point in trying to talk about these things, and somebody had to make decisions. So I would present ideas, and I would have the pros and cons listed out, and he would just very passively agree. And I just was assuming that that meant he was on board. But there was no like, well, what do you think? How do you feel? Because I think I had just sort of been trained through the marriage that I wasn't going to get that.
Yeah. And you know what? That's interesting because you're also a therapist, right? So at that time, were you specifically working with other couples or
Yeah.
did you
Yeah.
have a different niche you were working with at that time?
Yeah. Yeah. The problem is when you're, at least for me, everybody I worked with seems so much worse than my marriage. So,
Yeah.
that was the filter through which I was seeing my marriage. Like, oh, we're not so bad because
Yeah.
look at these people that I'm
We're
working with
not
on the board.
physically fighting. We're not,
We're not fighting. There's no
we're not
there's
cussing
no
each other
no
out.
abuse that I know of. Okay,
Yeah.
we've got these some strange dynamics going on, but
Yeah.
everybody's got something. You know, I'm not yeah, I'm a therapist, but as my husband now will say, I'm pretty good about like turning it off. Like when I leave the office, I don't go out there and, psychoanalyze him. I'm back to being Debbie the wife. And that's how I was there. That I wasn't analyzing the marriage on a daily basis. I was just living in it and
Yeah.
surviving in it until
Yeah.
I wasn't. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the question because of how you said that you were and how he was. So,
Mm.
how do you now check in with yourself emotionally, and how would you recommend others to do so? Because, like I said, right, sometimes it's not that maybe they don't want to just share how they feel, right? Maybe they do feel something, they just don't check in.
Well, I've been hugely blessed with my husband now, Jeff. I mean, he's just 180 degrees different from what I've experienced in the past. And
Good.
when I was in therapy during my separation and ultimately divorce, my therapist at the time had me write out, my must-haves, like my non-negotiables for a relationship, and then the things that were negotiable. And that was one of the best exercises I could have ever done because it really started me thinking intentionally about, well, if I do marry again, what do I know I want and need? And I got everything on my checklist and then some. Like it's amazing actually. But uh, the way that I stay intentional now is I realized that back then, especially 2013, that was like for me the worst year. It may not have been the worst year for my ex because he started losing a lot of it. He lost the ranch, but it was the worst year for me because of you know that became sort of that was my crossroads moment, right? Like I've got to do something different. But I realized I was making fear-based decisions. And everybody I work with to one degree or another, this is so true. When you are not happy with your life, but you're not doing anything about it, it's usually fear that's keeping you from making change. So what I do now is I constantly, when I'm getting ready to make a decision, I'm always asking myself, what's the motive behind this decision? Am I making this decision because I'm afraid of what will happen or not? So if it's a financial decision or a business decision or a relationship decision, whatever it is, I'm always analyzing what's the real motive behind this decision because I never want to be in that fear-based place again. Every time I make a fear-based decision, I make my life so much more complicated. It doesn't lead me anywhere positive. And I look back on all the things that I was always afraid of, and none of them ever happened.
Wow.
So why did I
Yeah.
waste so much energy being afraid?
Yeah. And having those fears takes that energy that you could be using to actually taking
Yes.
action.
Yeah. Yeah. I I I I I truly believe that the energy that it takes to be afraid is greater than the reality of what actually happens. Whatever it is, oh, if I spend this money, I'm going to go, I'm going to not be able to pay my bills. That fear up here is bigger than what really actually happens. And I see that over and over and over again in people.
Yeah, I feel that pattern, and it makes me ask because in your work now, you hear the same silent cries from women you coach and counsel. What are some of the most common patterns you see, right? Fear, that's one of them, right? And
Yeah.
what is the first thing you tell them when they admit, I'm not okay? Or maybe, yeah, maybe I'm making this decision out of fear.
Well, so that we talk about what do you really want your life to look like and who's responsible for getting it there. And it's not my job to tell women or men for that matter what to do, but it is my responsibility to say what's going to happen if you don't make the change that you want to make in your marriage or whatever. What does life look like in 6 months, a year from now, 10 years from now? Are you okay with that? If you're not okay with that, then what are you willing to do, even though it's scary? What are you willing to do to move yourself, not in big, huge leaps and bounds, but in tiny little incremental shifts? Because that's where real change occurs. Everybody
Okay,
wants
yes.
dramatic overnight shifts, right? But it's the tiny little shifts. Like today, I get up and I show up just a tiny bit different than I did yesterday.
And you talk about that right in your chapter, and it brings me to ask, how can someone begin their 1% shift today, even?
Yeah, well, you have to have a vision of what you really want, and then you break that vision down into really specific things. But every big giant goal, including like writing a book, can be broken down into a today step. The today step might be I'm going to write 100 words or 1,000 words, or depending on what your deadline is, right? Everything can be broken down into one little thing. So if you want to move your body more, I always bothers me when people say they go from 0 to like an insanity workout. Don't do that. You're not
Yeah,
going to maintain that. The
that's
insanity
how you can
workout
set, yeah,
is going to,
set.
yeah, and then you're going to quit because you're going to feel frustrated and discouraged, and then you're going to go right back to 0. So what does that 1% change look like? It looks like putting your workout clothes on and going for a 10-minute walk around the block. That's what it looks like. No, it didn't get your heart rate up that much, but you moved your body. And then maybe you do that for the rest of the week. And then next week you add another 5 or 10 minutes on, right? And then you increase the distance, or you walk a little faster, or you go from walking to jogging. But they're small steps that are attainable that you can still feel good about.
That is really good. I love that. First, getting clear on what you desire
Yeah.
and then breaking it down, right? So that it's
Mhm.
manageable and starting small if you need to, right? Maybe you don't need to read a whole book, within a month. Maybe you can read a few pages a day, right?
I have this long list of books that I wanna read, so what I do is I keep the book that I'm reading in the car, and whenever I'm a passenger, that's what I do. I'm like, "Okay, it's a visual reminder, I've got my book here that I need to read," and I just read a few more pages as we're driving along and, you know
That is so good.
yeah,
No, I
that's
really love
that's my
this.
1% with my book, right? And when that
Yeah.
book's finished, I bring that one, put it back on the shelf, grab another one, put it in the car. And I'm not talking about fiction, I'm talking about, like, the have to reads, the ones that are gonna, help me professionally to learn something that I'm not always gravitating towards, but I still need to read.
No, I like that a lot because that kind of growth is sustainable, right? And that's what you want. You
That's
don't want to burn
that's
yourself
the
out.
key.
Yeah,
Sustainable,
exactly.
yes, that's the
Sustainable.
key. Yes. Yeah, it doesn't matter what your goal is. I use the example of weight loss and exercise a lot because that's something that virtually everybody can really relate to. But I mean, this might be like learning how to change your money habits. This might be changing your communication with your spouse. There's so many different ways to apply this.
I like that a lot because, yeah, I think it can apply right in different
Mhm.
parts of your life, especially your relationships, right? That's a big one. And if that's one that you're dealing with. And
Yeah.
well,
Well,
I would love to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think your relationships are the most important way to apply this.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Debbie. You did an amazing job sharing your story, and not only here, but in the chapter. And then you'll be speaking, right, at our Girl
I
Heal Summit.
will. I will.
So we'll
So,
be
yeah, I'm
learning
excited
more.
about that too.
Yes, maybe can you tell us a little bit more about your talk there? I know maybe it will be in relation to what you've written already in Girl Heal and
Yeah.
some of what we talked
Yeah.
about now.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. So, I think I'm gonna share some other different aspects of my journey that don't duplicate the chapter, but still maybe flesh out some details. And I really like if I had like, my soapbox, I think that the message that he really tried to instill in women so much is you're responsible for your life. Your spouse isn't, nobody else is responsible. So if
That's
you
that
don't
accountability, right?
yeah, if you don't love the life that you have, then what are you gonna do about it? So, that
Exactly.
personal accountability and the intentionality, and that's the whole thing about the new path, right? When you get on that path of, like, hardcore, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming
Yes.
the weather, I'm not
Yes,
blaming the
exactly.
traffic, I'm not
Ah,
blaming my
yes.
spouse, I'm not blaming anybody.
Yes.
What I got is what I got, and if I don't like it, then I'm gonna do something
Yes,
about
I agree 100%. And I cannot wait to hear your speech inside of the Girl Heal Summit. That's also happening August 25th. So
it. Mhm.
definitely, if you haven't gotten a ticket yet, definitely grab your ticket. You'll be hearing Debbie and I and a bunch of other amazing, powerful women who will be sharing more about their stories as well and how to get you moving forward in your business and life. So
Mhm.
thank you so much, Debbie. Do you have any programs that you're running right now or anything you're offering for women that might want to connect with you? Of course, I'll drop it in the show notes and I'll share your
Sure.
links as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the program I'm really super excited about right now, I just signed up a couple, into this program just yesterday, actually, is my 6-month marriage intensive, Marriage in Bloom, and this one's new, like, I launched it, about 6 weeks ago, and, it is intensive. I'm so excited about it, like, I've worked crazy hard on putting this together,
Good.
and it's an intensive coaching package along with, I mean, an ability to reach out to me every single day. Like, most
Wow.
coaching packages, you only get like a once a week coaching. This is like,
Yeah. Sounds
Monday
amazing.
through Friday touch points with me, weekly exercises, journaling prompts. Like, there's just so much to this. Um, when I say intensive, I mean intensive. It's a lot of work. So
Wow.
it's
Yes.
only for the truly committed, who really,
Yes,
really want to turn their
exactly.
yeah.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. If you're currently someone, right, that's wanting to do some of that relationship counseling, improve that communication, take accountability, build that self awareness, then Debbie is your girl.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I'm looking forward to all of our continued collaborations and can't wait to see everyone at the Girl Heal Summit.
Thanks for having me, and I'm
Bye.
excited about the summit.
I'm excited.